Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Dear Evan Hansen. There are bad movies that are like fun or good bad movies, and then there is Dear Evan Hansen. This movie is really horrible. It is not fun to watch. If you're gonna watch this with your friends for the lulz, it is 137 minutes, which I did not know. Probably would not have even done this had I known that. And it is not a funny let's have drinks and laugh at. It's more of you just going like, oh, this is really really horrible. I would honestly call this movie morally repugnant in a way that, like, I feel like we probably should be protesting in some way because it is like so morally awash. Like, how can you be apolitical about lying? And this movie accomplishes that, which is remarkable. I really feel uncomfortable that anyone who made or wrote this movie thinks that this is okay morally to make this film. I honestly don't want to be in a room alone with any of these people. They seem horrible. And this musical is not good. Maybe it's different on the stage. I didn't see that. Clearly, I'm not reviewing that. Maybe it's better. Maybe it was awful this whole time. I literally have no clue. But what I saw of this movie was so misguided that you question what they were even trying to do, because there's no real theory behind everything. They're trying to be kind of like heartwarming and stuff. It sort of wants to be ordinary people, but like if you had never seen the movie Ordinary People and no one who made the film is an actual ordinary person, then it's sort of like that. So Dear Evan Hansen is about a guy named Evan Hansen. He suffers from social anxiety, various other things, and he's in therapy and all this stuff. And his therapist told him to write a letter, a Dear Evan Hansen letter, or a letter to himself every day to tell him all the good things about his day and stuff. And he writes one at the school computer lab, which doesn't seem like something you should do if you're doing one of those, and then prints it out, which is totally a thing kids do in the 2010s, is print things for their own personal use, because this movie knows teens. And then he prints it out and he meets up this guy named Connor who signs his cast, because he has a cast because he tried to jump out of the tree and all this stuff. And Connor, who looks remarkably like Chris Stuckman. In fact, it would have been funny if he wrote on his cast, get Stuckmanized. I think that would have been wonderful. He's not Chris Stuckman. I didn't check, but I'm like 80% sure it's another actor. Anyway, not Chris Stuckman sees the letter, freaks out. The letter also has stuff about his sister, which would have been Connor's sister, which would have been really funny. He wrote something way creepier. It could be like changed into like a joke, but this movie has like no self-awareness or sense of humor. It's not a fun movie. So there's one part it does, but not in the way that would be like funny. Connor takes the letter, he folds it up in his pocket, this Dear Evan Hansen letter, and then he kills himself, and they find the letter on him when he kills himself, so they assume it's like his suicide note or something, because Evan Hansen's really bad at motivating himself in letters. But then Connor's parents, or Chris Stuckman's parents, come to Evan Hansen and they're like, get Stuckmanized. No, they basically like, how did you know Connor? You were friends, right? And at first, because he does have social anxiety, he kind of was like, yeah, totally, you know, he's a nice guy, even though he wasn't. And I can sort of see him just like sort of agreeing with them and going, yeah, no, your kid was great, who's dead now. And then he invites him over and he just starts making crap up, and it becomes this huge lie. And then he like sings or gives a speech in the universe of the movie, or sings the movie, and it goes viral for some reason. I couldn't figure out why. If someone sent me that clip, I'd want to watch it, that I'd even watch it in general, and what was so amazing about it. But he goes viral, there's a foundation, all these various things that people are trying to accomplish because this guy is dead and they can get something from it. And at no point in this movie does anyone go, hey, that's weird and wrong. Evan Hansen gets to date Connor's sister, who he really likes, and all this stuff. You can kind of tell where this is going. Except, I'm going to spoil it, I guess. He doesn't really. This whole movie, the premise is sort of like a sitcom plot. It's like a plot of Happy Days or something like that, where like there's a misunderstanding, like a regular misunderstanding, and then it like spirals out of control, and by the end the Fonz is like, I'm sorry, I never drove an ice cream truck and I can't sell ice cream to your 5-year-old's birthday party, or something like that. But instead, this is not like Jumping the Shark Happy Days. This is like Happy Days 9th season where they go to the dude ranch or something. This doesn't even have that part of the Happy Days episode, which is like, I've never seen a movie fail at attempting something that a Happy Days episode does much better, or Mork and Mindy, or The Honeymooners, or so many others. It feels like this, you know how the structure would go. You get your comeuppance. But I think a lot of this is because, so we keep hearing about Ben Platt, who, you know, plays a teenager, and that doesn't really work, and they give him they like basically take away the bags from his eyes, which doesn't really work, so he looks like sort of inhuman, and he has a weird face anyway, and it just like he tries to act like a teen, which is strange because no one else if everyone else in the movie was like older like him, it would work, like Beverly Hills 90210 or something, but it's just like doesn't set on a reality. It just looks like, well, he's Evan Hansen, so of course, and it's like, well, why like that part didn't make any sense, and it never does, and you just kind of go with it, and then he's clearly like not 17 the whole movie, and it's not like that Martin Short movie or something. It's just is, and it's never not weird. But Ben Platt, a lot of them brought up that his father, Mark Platt, produced this and basically was the one who like got this to be a movie, and Hollywood nepotism, and you know, that is definitely a thing that always happens. But what I think watching this that seems more nefarious is, I think someone who has a very protective life, who got his musical through Hollywood nepotism, presumably, I don't really know, but he definitely has a rich dad who's very up in the movie industry, and then he writes a movie that's supposed to be a feel-good movie about like someone doing something pretty bad, like lying to the parents of a dead kid about like this like huge friendship he had with this kid. In the end, there's no real consequences. He kind of like doesn't get to go out with the girl or whatever, but like that's about it. And it felt like a rich kid wrote it, like he didn't understand the consequences of his actions. I don't think someone who doesn't understand the consequences of their actions should be writing stories about this. And I also barely think they're a person, if that's the case too, but that's like a larger conversation. But it just feels like someone who like wants to bring up topics but doesn't really understand the weight of them, like someone who is like, let's play devil's advocate. Anyway, so slavery. It feels like someone who just doesn't understand the weight of the world or the weight of their ramifications can have on other people. And doing something like this is all about that. So it completely, you know, it's supposed to be feel good. It's supposed to show like, well, look at all the good things his lie did, which is like, again, like why I don't want to be in a room alone with them, because they'd murder me and convince the world like the world would be better without me, in a weird, like very twisted, rich people are evil, It's a Wonderful Life scenario. But they often have him sing, like they sing on set because Les Mis did that horribly, so let's ruin another movie, I guess. And that never works because, I mean, by the way, in old Hollywood, they always thought that was a horrible idea. And I love how these filmmakers who clearly do not know old Hollywood musicals or don't like musicals very much, because like if you watch Dear Evan Hansen, like it's remarkable that this movie, like post Cats, this is so disappointing. Like Cats was fun, at least, and had a perspective. Like Evan Hansen, it was like a crazy nonsense movie. This is just like the ramblings of someone who should not be writing creatively because they don't, you know, understand morals or whatever. Like, and you know, the World's Greatest Dad of it all is like, World's Greatest Dad was about morals. Like, it was really fucked up and dark, but it was about like morally understanding what the right thing is, like for you as the viewer. And this like tries to skirt that, and like the whole thing with like the girl who's like running, is like the student body president, and how like she makes this foundation, but that's so cynical. Like, she didn't like Connor or Chris Stuckman or whatever. She like didn't care, and then I mean, she, or maybe she did, but like it never really, they weren't friends. And then suddenly she's making this foundation. It's clearly just for like college credit, and it's like really just like very cynical way, but there's no cynicism. It's like, this reminded me of movies like Heathers or World's Greatest Dad, or any of the very cynical like high school movies that we've seen over the years, but if you took out all the cynicism. And it feels in that very like post-Obama optimism wave, you know, we had like Hamilton is probably a part of that, or Glee or something like that. But I think this is probably the most dated one I've seen, because it just like takes out all the grit of something but doesn't understand why that grit is even there. It just like doesn't like feeling bad. And you're like, that I don't think you have to be cynical all the time, But to use this kind of narrative, you have to understand why you're telling it. And I don't think they do. I think it's just like, well, what if, he wanted to be seen, which I do not relate to high school movies like that, because I was in high school. That was like the worst thing in the world to me. So like that, I have such a disconnect from movies like this. Like, don't you want to be heard by everyone? I'm like, fuck no, I want to go home. Can we have a movie about the guy who just like leaves and runs home as fast as humanly possible? I would relate to that much more, because like people who like high school, worst people ever. I am shocked that this is a mainstream movie and that nobody called them on it. I mean, I've heard the Broadway show is better and explains more. I'm assuming it works on the stage, but from a morals perspective, I would like not show this to kids. Like, I think this is pretty morally offensive. Like, I actually think Cannibal Holocaust has better morals than Dear Evan Hansen. And like that movie's pretty, I mean, maybe not on set it didn't have better morals, but like the movie itself, you know what I mean? It just like doesn't understand why you tell the story of someone lying like this. Like, what would be the point of telling that story? And it never does. And the performances are all off. I guess I'm supposed to say like Amy Adams or Julianne Moore is good. They're always good. But it wasn't particularly great performances by them. The fact that they kept a straight face and got through it, I think, is sort of nice. Same with like Caitlin Dever, people like that. But I just did not like this movie whatsoever. There was one part, the song, where like him and his friend are like making up all the email, like they make up emails for this dead kid for his parents and make up this whole relationship. That was like fun. That was kind of funny, like him and this kid who like never got along, like dancing and stuff, and like his friend like trying to put in like some sort of a romance and stuff. That was like the only part of the movie that was at all any good and any fun. The weird thing is like this movie is not fun, but at the same time really wants to be positive. It really just felt like an evil rich person who didn't want to be negative. Negative is like, they don't want to be negative. He wants to be positive all the time. And this wasn't the narrative for that. I don't think this was like how this was going to work. I do think this movie was inherently kind of evil, and I do really morally question almost everyone who is majorly involved in this creatively, that they thought that this was an acceptable thing to put into the world and presumably shown to high school kids. Like, I would honestly don't think this should be screened for people. Like, I think it shows bad moral lessons in itself. Like, it's a very bad movie, and at its core very rotten, because these are cynical people. Like, if you are taking advantage of someone's death in that way, that's not honoring them as a person. If you barely understand them, regardless of if you're helping all those people, that's pretty horrible. Like, this guy's identity is gone based on a lie because this guy wanted to like hook up with his sister. I don't know how to make this movie not evil. That's the thing, because it is like one of the most evil movies I think I've ever seen morally. It's like offensive. Like, I really don't get. I guess this was better on stage. I guess morally it worked better. There was like the song where he feels really bad about himself or something and like doesn't get to go to college, which if it was in the social media age and he like was discovered, that is what would happen, that would fit in, but that of course doesn't happen. He takes a year off because, he can just do that. I really don't like this movie. It's probably the worst movie I saw this year. I know that's like shooting fish in a barrel. It's low-hanging fruit or whatever, but it really is just a repugnant film. It is bad. I will say, again, it is bad in that way that it's just bad and awful and painful to get through. And there's nothing pretty other than that one musical sequence. Can't think of anything that is redeemable whatsoever. It's weird that the director of Perks of Being a Wallflower made it, but maybe not so much. I wasn't as crazy about that movie, but this is it's a bad attempt at a musical because people just randomly start singing and singing on set, so the sound's all not great, and then the morals are just so askew, and it's just like watching someone not understand the morals of a fucking Happy Days episode and taking the plot of World's Greatest Dad and taking out all the negativity, but not understanding why any of that's there. I don't think any of these people, if they're going to make a story again, should really think about why they're doing these things, because I don't think they thought about any of that at all. And I think that's a luxury that Ben Platt has, that he can tell a story and basically do something without any real consequences on his life, and you can tell that throughout this entire narrative, that he doesn't have much consequence because he has no consequence as a person, which you can tell because he made a movie that was this morally awful as Dear Evan Hansen. So if you've seen Dear Evan Hansen and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.